Greetings, thank you for joining me today. Matt Customer Service back with another best practice conversation. What makes for a great call? What makes for great customer service? Well, it's three things in a call centre environment. Number one, what you say. Number two, what you hear. Number three, what your customer hears. If you can manage all these three things together, you'll have a great call and your customer will have a great call. And everything stems from that. Fail to pay attention to these three things and your call quality is likely to go sideways with everything else. So what you say and how you say it determine how successful your call will be. A lot of us have to deal with very complicated subjects, and sales pitches, customer service work, it all has a measure of complication, and we can't guarantee that we're going to be understood first time every time. You can't. So you have to listen to what the caller is telling you, or the person you're calling is telling you, to determine whether you're being understood or not. If you can get it right, then your call length goes down, because if you can explain yourself properly first time, you won't have to repeat yourself and everything can proceed in a nice way. Now, you might not make a sale, but it lets the person you're calling or determine how much of their time to spend with you, and likewise for yourself. Now, over the years I've worked in many call centres, and some of them have had, shall we say, authoritarian approaches to the way calls must be handled, to the extent of having a script that tells you everything to say, literally everything to say. Don't bring yourself to the call, just follow the script, say it verbatim, and everything will be good. Now, there is a time and a place for a script. It's just when things have to be said a certain way to be legally valid. A good example of this is the standard direct debit guarantee that you'll hear from anyone setting up a direct debit. It has to be worded a certain way to be understood, to be clear, and there's no problem with that. I have no problem with these sort of things at all. Where I do have a problem is where a script tries to regulate how many times you say a customer's name in a call. The recommended time. That's absolute bull. Or other ways of approaching the call or opening the call, because everyone's different and you should be able to bring yourself to the role. Bring yourself to the role. Open up naturally. It sounds better when you do. Now, there are folk out there who love a good script. I would humbly suggest that these people are best not placed in a customer-facing role, because honestly, scripts restrict you and they restrict your responsiveness. Okay, so there are certain things you've got to say a certain way, fine, but let the contact centre staff be themselves, because when they are more free to be themselves, and rather than worrying about what the script says or the way you have to word yourself, then they'll be more likely to explain themselves better, and the calls will be more effective. They'll be shorter. I'll give you a good example. So there's a local Wolverhampton company that for the longest time were making cold calls to people trying to sell conservatories. And conservatories, for those who don't know, they're those little glass houses that you can have if you own a house with a garden, and they're just an extension of the living space, but like walking out into a greenhouse. Great if you've got the space, great if you've got the money, great if you don't mind the fact that you lose a lot of heat through them. Anyway, so they were making cold calls to everybody, and the best approach, of course, would be not to answer, but we don't all have that luxury. Now, a friend of mine, in a sales role himself, he keeps getting calls on his work mobile, and every day for like 20 days, keeps getting calls on his work mobile trying to sell him a conservatory. And the first 20 times he says, please take me off your list, this is a work mobile, and for the record, I don't own a house, so please stop trying to sell me a conservatory. He lived in a flat, second floor flat. So, but no, they didn't take him off the list, of course, and he had to keep answering the phone. So 20th time, he got a bit sick of it, and he decided to take action. So he decided to take this sales guy through the whole sales spiel. Unfortunately, the sales spiel was run to a script. The script starts by obviously saying hello and telling him they were selling the conservatories and would you be interested in one, and then rolls into a description of all the products that they offer. Okay, so he says, well, yes, I'd love a conservatory, and he starts to order the biggest conservatory they have with all the trimmings, right down to the type of tint on the glass and the sort of handles he wants on the opening windows, all that. And delivery dates. Unfortunately, the very last thing they asked was the address. So it was 25 minutes into the call when they finally asked for, well, where do you live and when can we arrange for this to happen? And he says, I'll give you my address. Name. 2nd floor flat. Lane. And he got as far as that before the salesperson realised and cut him off. Half an hour wasted. Half an hour that he's not going to get back, nor is the salesperson, because they were following a script. A rigid script that didn't allow deviation. Now, had that salesperson been allowed to ask first of all, well, do you own a house with a garden? Would you like a conservatory? Word it a little differently. Then the people calling could have said, no, I don't have a house, can you take me off the list? And had they been able to actually act on that and take people off the list when they're definitely not a lead, they could have then focused on calling people repeatedly who don't have a house, who might finally have buckled and bought a blessed conservatory. So an example of a really poor script and how a script can lead to excessive calls, lengthy calls that don't need to happen. So what you say and what you don't say determines how long that call can potentially be and whether that call is a success or not. Now, you can learn a lot from colleagues. A lot of people, more experienced people, will have a way of describing things that gets done quicker. And so this is a shorter call if you can follow their lead. And I've had colleagues of my own who sat there and sat through call escalation after call escalation needlessly, and then they sort of click and decide to start copying me, and in so doing describe things better to their callers, to their customers, and start ending up with shorter calls that don't need to escalate to a manager because someone's got cross. I'll give you a great example of that. I used to work for a local authority collecting council tax. Now, council tax, for those who live outside the UK, is a tax levied on every property. So it's paid by whoever lives in that property generally. It's a certain amount paid every year, either monthly, quarterly, annually, that pays for local services like the removal of rubbish, repair of roads, street lighting, policing, schools, you name it. And every household has a responsibility to pay it. And it's exactly how much you pay is determined when it comes to council tax by the size of the property, the value of the property as determined at a certain point. And there's a certain banding applies. So now, depending on where the house is and who is living in the house, you might find somebody has a limited ability to pay the amount due on that property. Particularly those who are on limited incomes, pensioners, for example, or the very young, people with families, they're often suffering limited means. And when I worked for the collections department for the local authority, we had a lot of calls which could have escalated. There was a lot of potential for escalation to management as people were calling saying, I can't pay, I won't pay, and reasons, I need to speak to manager, and they will kick up a fuss and hoped that some manager will go, oh, don't there, you don't have to pay. But obviously it never happened because they had to pay. You have a responsibility to pay your taxes, because this is how the civilized world works. Everyone kicks in and it all works. I'm not going to sit here and try and justify, how the money's spent. But if your council's working properly, the money's spent well. So it's all for a good cause. Now, a couple of my colleagues struggled with getting people through the call. Now, if you were in a role like that, collecting a debt, now you can go for the full amount, and the full amount might be a considerable sum. Now, the people who choose to call in, as they would call in to the debt management type of line, they were calling in because they were struggling. You know this because they've taken time to call in. Now, some would call in to make payment in full, but they were maybe 1 in 10. 1 in 10. The rest of the calls were people who had limited ability, and they would try and put some sort of repayment plan in place. Now, if you word things wrongly, a call could easily escalate. They would love to escalate a call to some people kick up a fuss. Their plan is to kick up a fuss, claim that they're being hard done by, claim that reasons they shouldn't have to pay, and they will let it get right to the point where the debt collectors are knocking on the door, seizing cars, towing them away, and so on, and before they actually take action. Now, you can either try and go for the full amount, or you can explain yourself clearly and take as much as they're prepared to part with. And if you listen properly, you can hear the money. You can hear the money, and you know exactly how much they have to offer. Now, a lot of people are quite deceptive, and they won't tell you fully what they're able to pay. And it is possible to irritate someone to the point where they just get cross with you and pay in full and slam the phone down on you. But it's all good because you've taken a full payment. Or you can take a part payment. It's still a positive. It's not maybe as positive as you'd like it to be, but it hasn't escalated to your manager. So your call length has been shorter, and your overall average handling time will be shorter, and everything's looking good because the number of calls you can potentially take in the day will still be just fine and dandy. What we don't want is one call escalating out of proportion and taking up a lot of your time, your manager's time, then sucking the number of calls that you can take. Yeah, so that's how it goes. And if you have to say no to somebody, so be it. Just point blank, no, I need to speak to your manager. No. I demand to speak to you. No. You can always pop them on mute. Let them talk at dead air. It's about what they hear. This brings me on to the second subject then. It's about what the customer hears. So the sounds that your caller hears and the sounds that your caller does not hear will determine how well that call goes for you and for, of course, the caller. Got to think about every aspect of this while you're taking the call, or just get into the practice of doing things properly. That way you'll avoid extraneous noise creeping in and gnawing away at your productivity and your success rate. I'll give you an example. So a lot of people who are nervous on the phone have a nasty habit of calling in and letting their nervous tics run wild. It could be playing with an object, a noisy object. These not so noisy, but sort of clicking sounds, clicking pens, supping on a vape, for example, slurping a drink, eating an apple, chewing gum, smoking a cigarette, whatever it happens to be. There's a lot of things that you can do to supposedly calm your nerves during a call that the person listening to that will find absolutely revolting. Now, if you find yourself on the receiving end of such revolting sounds, of course, what you can do is just take the headset off for a little while and give yourself a bit of space from that sound, and hope when you put that headset back on that noise has stopped. And you'd also, by the same token, try not to do that yourself. It's a matter of professional pride that you should not put extra noises in that would turn someone's stomach. It's just the way I see it. I think we all benefit when that happens. Another one people do that drives down qualities is try and take a sales call like they're on The Apprentice. You know, when they put them on the speakerphone and they're like this. No. Or doing that while they're walking down the street. That is not the way to take a call. That's how you take a call. I digress. But again, it introduces sounds into the call that whittles away at your professionalism and whittles away at your potential within that call. It's particularly if you're doing a sales role, you need to sound like you're focused on it. So we don't want any extraneous noises that suggest that you're not. You can also manipulate remove sounds from the conversation. You can remove sound altogether, and this can work in your advantage as well, because again, what the caller doesn't want to hear is conversations you might have with people around you. It doesn't want to hear, and you certainly don't want recorded, certain calls where you might want to be discussing things that would eat away at your position. But again, this is so there's a place, a time and a place for a hold, and there's a time and a place for a silent mute. And if your call center software has that feature, it's worth using both the hold with music, which no one enjoys, or the just simply put someone on silent mute, make sure it's on, make sure they can't hear you, don't, and be careful what you say even when the mute's on, just in case, because you never can tell with software mutes. Control that silence and you control a lot. And some people will actually control it in order to make people feel uncomfortable, but that's another call, that's another conversation, that's another day. But if you control that call, you control the sounds, you go a long way to having a successful call. So controlling what you say and what the customer hears will go a long way to controlling that call and making sure you both get the most out of it. What goes hand in hand with this is making good, detailed notes. Now, we don't all have the ability to do this, especially if we're working in an environment which is noisy, shall we say. A lot of the offices these days are not fit for purpose in that respect, and cost cutting has seen the removal of the traditional cubicle from these places. I think there's still a place because it's simple, it's maintenance free, and once it's in place, that's it. 3 walls around each member of staff, low-lying walls. They don't have to be high, they don't have to be complete floor to the ceiling walls, just something from desk level up to about 12-24 inches off the desk. That is sufficient. It's not something you have to pin notices on, it's just a barrier between you and another call taking place. When you've got these barriers in place, the quality of those calls goes up, because when you listen to the call, what you don't hear is anything other than the caller and the member of staff talking to them. You don't hear, Barry in the next cubicle on having a chat with his customer. You don't hear that. It's a good, clean call without any risk of any data being leaked, and that caller knows they're the sole focus of the member of staff they were speaking to. It's as simple as that. So it's a plea to anyone who's designing these places, design in, add a little cost for sound baffling. It's necessary. Keep it simple. Don't rely on hanging curtains, to separate one side of the room from another. That only goes so far, because if you've got 30 people talking on one side of the screen and 30 people on the other, the 30 people on the one side are still having to listen to each other, even if they can't hear the other 30 on the other side. And in my experience, those screens don't, they're not worth it. They're really not. You have to take a lot of care. And I wish, honestly, that designers, the people that pay for these offices, did a little more of that. Anyway, that's my rant over for today. I do appreciate you taking the time to listen to me today. If you've got a moment, I'd also appreciate a like and subscribe or a comment. It's all good. I'd love to hear from you, and it helps the channel immensely. Anyway, whatever you do, have a great day, have a great week. Bye for now.